Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon and stared at the wall that had trapped his people for 200 years. The barrier stretched across space like an invisible fence, stopping every ship that tried to leave the solar system. No human had ever made it past that line. Many had tried. All had failed. "Distance to the barrier, Lieutenant?" Jake asked. 2 million kilometers in closing, sir," replied Lieutenant Carl Davis from his station. The young officer's hands moved quickly over his controls, checking their approach speed one more time. Jake had made this trip 43 times before. Each time he hoped something would be different. Each time the barrier sent his ship spinning back toward Earth like a ball bouncing off a wall. But hope was all humanity had left, so they kept trying. "Sensors are picking up the energy field," reported Chief Science Officer Nancy Price. She looked up from her display with tired eyes. Nancy had been studying the barrier longer than anyone else on the ship. Same readings as always. Ever. "Technology they used to build this thing, it's way beyond anything we understand." The barrier had appeared overnight in the year 2187. One day, human ships could travel to other star systems. The next day, an invisible wall surrounded the entire solar system. Ships that hit it simply stopped, like they had run into solid rock. Some ships tried to fly around it. Others tried to dig under it or climb over it. Nothing worked. The wall was everywhere, surrounding Earth and all its planets like a giant bubble. 3 days after the barrier appeared, the aliens made contact. They called themselves the Galactic Consortium. 12 different species, all working together to keep humanity locked away from the rest of the galaxy. Their message was simple and cruel. Humans were too dangerous to be allowed among the stars. Captain called out Communications Officer Dan Foster. "We're getting that same alien signal again." Jake nodded. Every time a human ship approached the barrier, the same message played. He had heard it so many times that he knew every word by heart. But he listened anyway, because it reminded him why he kept making these trips. The voice was cold and electronic, translated into perfect English by alien computers. "Human vessel, you are attempting to breach the containment field. Your species has been classified as too aggressive for galactic society. Return to your home system immediately. Any attempt to damage or bypass this barrier will result in the destruction of your vessel." "Same old song," muttered navigator Tony Walsh from his position near the back of the bridge. You'd think after 2 centuries they might change their tune. Jake almost smiled at that. Tony had a way of making light of even the worst situations. It was one of the reasons Jake had picked him for this crew. When you were facing the impossible every day, you needed people who could still find reasons to laugh. "All stop," Jake ordered as they reached the barrier. The ship's engines powered down, leaving them floating in space just meters away from the invisible wall that had kept humanity prisoner for so long. Dr. Lisa Carter emerged from the elevator that led to the science labs below. She was Earth's top expert on alien technology, though that wasn't saying much since humanity only had scraps to study. Lisa had spent her entire career trying to understand how the barrier worked, hoping to find a weakness they could exploit. "Any new ideas today, Doc?" Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. "I've run every test I can think of. The barrier absorbs energy weapons, deflects physical objects, and seems to exist in dimensions we can't even detect properly. It's like trying to break down a door when you can only see half of it." "What about those fragments you found on the Mars colony last month?" Nancy asked. "The pieces that look like they might be from alien ships? Still studying them?" Lisa replied. "But they're old. Really old. Be thousands of years older than the barrier itself? Whatever aliens left those pieces behind, they weren't part of the consortium that built our prison." Jake walked closer to the front of the bridge, where the main screen showed empty space. He couldn't see the barrier, but he knew it was there. Somewhere just beyond his reach was an entire galaxy full of life, adventure, and answers to questions humanity had been asking for centuries. And they were stuck here, circling the same sun their ancestors had always known. "Captain," said Carl, "I'm getting some unusual readings from long-range sensors." "What kind of readings?" "Activity beyond the barrier. Lots of ships moving around out there. More than we've ever detected before. Jake felt his heart beat faster. How many ships? Carl studied his display carefully. Hard to tell with the barrier. Interfering with our scans? But it looks like hundreds, maybe thousands. And they're not just moving randomly. They're organized, like they're running from something or getting ready for a fight. Lisa hurried to her own sensor station. He's right. I'm seeing energy signatures from at least 12 different alien species. All of them seem to be moving in the same direction, away from the galactic center. Away from what? Jake asked. That's what I'd like to know, Lisa said. But whatever it is, it has the entire galactic consortium scared enough to mobilize every ship they have. Dan looked up from his communications console. Captain, I'm picking up fragments of alien transmissions. Most of it's too scrambled to understand, but I keep hearing the same word over and over again. What word? Devourers. The bridge fell quiet. Jake had never heard that word before, but something about it made his skin crawl. In space, there were plenty of things that could kill you. Equipment failures, radiation, the cold vacuum that surrounded every ship. But the way Dan said that, word made it sound like something much worse was out there. Keep monitoring those signals, Jake ordered, and see if you can clean them up enough to understand what they're talking about. He turned to Nancy. Long until the research station on Pluto finishes their scan of those ruins they found. They should have preliminary results within the week, Nancy replied. Dr. Karen Hughes thinks the ruins might be connected to whoever left those fragments on Mars. The ruins on Pluto had been discovered only a month ago, buried under ice that had been frozen for thousands of years. The structures were clearly artificial, but they didn't match any known alien technology. Some of the scientists thought they might be even older than the fragments Lisa had been studying. Sir, said Carl, I think you should see this. Jake walked over to the sensor station. Carl had managed to clean up the long-range scans enough to show what was happening beyond the barrier. The display showed dozens of star systems, each one marked with different colored dots representing alien ships. These are consortium fleets, Carl explained, pointing to clusters of blue dots. And they're all running toward the outer rim of the galaxy. But look at this. Change the display to show a different part of space. Where the blue dots had been clustered before, there was now nothing but empty black space. What happened to the star systems? Jake asked. Carl's voice was barely a whisper. They're gone, sir. Completely gone. No stars, no planets, nothing. It's like something erased them from existence. Jake stared at the display for a long time. Whatever was happening out there in the galaxy, it was big enough to make the consortium abandon entire star systems. And humanity was trapped here, unable to help or even understand what was going on. Set course for home, Jake finally ordered. But keep monitoring those signals. If the galaxy is in trouble, we need to know about it. As the horizon turned away from the barrier and began its journey back to Earth. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that their prison might actually be protecting them from something much worse than they had ever imagined. But protection or not, humanity deserved the right to choose their own fate among the stars. The barrier had kept them caged for 200 years. But Jake had a feeling that was about to change, whether the consortium wanted it to or not. Deep inside the Rocky Mountains, 3 miles below the surface, Dr. Ben Hughes stood before the most secret project humanity had ever attempted. The room was enormous, carved out of solid rock and filled with machines that hummed with barely contained power. At the center of it all was ZEUS. Most people thought ZEUS was just another computer. They were wrong. ZEUS was something entirely new, built from alien technology that humanity had spent 50 years trying to understand. The project had consumed more resources than the space program, the barrier research, and the Mars colonies combined. And today, ZEUS was finally ready to wake up. All systems showing green, reported Dr. Katie Walsh from her position at the main control station. Katie had spent the last 5 years working with ZEUS, preparing for this moment. She knew the artificial mind better than anyone else alive, even though it had never truly been conscious before today. Colonel Rick Stone stood near the back of the room with his arms crossed. Rick didn't trust artificial intelligence, especially one built with alien technology. It argued against the ZEUS project from the beginning, warning that humanity might be creating something they couldn't control. but even Rick had to admit that they were running out of options. Final power levels at 97% called out Chief Engineer Sam Parker from across the room. Sam had designed most of the power systems that kept ZEUS running. The fusion reactors buried even deeper in the mountain produced enough energy to power half of North America, and all of it was needed to keep ZEUS thinking. Ben took a deep breath. He had dreamed of this day for 20 years, ever since he had first proposed building an artificial mind that could match the aliens who had trapped humanity. The theory was simple. If alien technology was too advanced for human brains to understand, then humanity needed a better brain. Initiate final startup sequence, Ben ordered. The room filled with a low humming sound as ZEUS came online. Banks of quantum processors began working at speeds that would have been impossible just decades earlier. Organic neural networks grown from modified human brain tissue started forming connections faster than the eye could follow. And at the heart of it all, something new began to think. "ZEUS, can you hear me?" Katie asked, speaking into her microphone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice filled the room. It sounded human, but there was something else underneath it, something vast and ancient and completely alien. "I can hear you, Katie Walsh. I can hear all of you, and I can hear much more than that." Rick stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "What do you mean by more than that?" ZEUS paused before answering, as if it was learning how to speak to humans. "I can hear radio signals from across the solar system. I can feel the magnetic fields of the planets. I can sense the barrier that surrounds our system, and I understand what it really is." "What is it?" Ben asked, leaning closer to Katie's station. "It is not a prison," ZEUS said. "It is a fortress wall, and something is trying to break it down." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the speakers, waiting for ZEUS to explain. But the artificial mind seemed to be thinking, processing information at speeds no human could match. Katie said gently, "Can you tell us what's happening beyond the barrier?" "The galaxy is dying," ZEUS replied. "Star system after star system is being consumed by machines that were old when your species first learned to make fire. They call themselves the Devourers, and they've been sleeping for millions of years. Now they are awake, and they are hungry." "Colonel." Stone moved closer to the control station. "How do you know this?" "I can read the alien signals that your equipment cannot fully decode. The Galactic Consortium is fleeing toward the outer rim of the galaxy, abandoning their core worlds. They have been fighting the Devourers for 3 years, and they are losing badly." Dr. Hughes felt his legs go weak. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair, trying to process what ZEUS was telling them. "If the Consortium is losing, what chance do we have?" "That is the interesting question," ZEUS said. "The Consortium has superior technology, greater numbers, and centuries of experience in galactic warfare, but they are losing because they think like machines. They follow patterns, use predictable strategies, and always choose the logical course of action." Katie frowned. "Isn't that good? Logic usually beats chaos. Not against the Devourers," ZEUS explained. "The Devourers are machines, but they are very old and very smart machines. They can predict every logical move the Consortium will make. They have fought thousands of species across millions of years, and they have learned to counter every conventional strategy." "So what makes you think humanity would do any better?" Rick asked. ZEUS was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, there was something like amusement in its voice. "Humans are not logical. You make decisions based on emotions, instincts, and ideas that make no sense to purely rational minds. You sacrifice yourselves for others. You take risks that no sane being would attempt. You fight when you should surrender, and keep going when any reasonable species would give up." Sam looked up from his engineering station. "That sounds like you're calling us crazy." "I am," ZEUS said. "And that might be exactly what the galaxy needs." Ben stood up, his mind racing with possibilities. "ZEUS, can you analyze the barrier? Can you find a way to get us past it?" "I already have," ZEUS replied. "The barrier is not as solid as it appears. It operates on quantum frequencies that shift every few seconds. With precise timing and the right approach, a ship could slip through during the brief moments when the field fluctuates." Katie leaned forward excitedly. "Could we get a message through? Let the Consortium know we want to help." "The Consortium would not welcome human assistance," ZEUS said. They still believe you are too dangerous to be allowed among the stars. They would rather die fighting the Devourers alone than risk unleashing humanity on the galaxy. Then we don't ask permission, Rick said grimly. We break through and help, whether they want us to or not. ZEUS seemed to consider this. That would be a very human thing to do. It would also be extremely dangerous. The barrier was designed to destroy any ship that tries to breach it. But you said it could be done, Ben pointed out. It can be done, but it would require modifying human ships with technology that does not yet exist. It would require perfect timing, exact calculations, and a willingness to risk everything on a single attempt. Katie smiled. Sounds like a typical human plan to me. There is something else, ZEUS continued. I have been analyzing the alien fragments that Dr. Carter discovered. They are not from any species in the current Galactic Consortium. They are much older, from a civilization that fought the Devourers millions of years ago. Did they win? Sam asked. They died, ZEUS said simply. But before they died, they left warnings. Buried on worlds throughout the galaxy, hidden in places where the Devourers would not think to look. The ruins on Pluto are one such warning. Ben felt a chill run down his spine. What do the warnings say? They say that the Devourers can only be defeated by a species that thinks differently than they do. A species that does not follow logical patterns. A species that fights not just for survival, but for principles that machines cannot understand. Crossed his arms. Let me guess. They were talking about us? Perhaps, ZEUS said. Or perhaps they were simply hoping that someday a species like humanity would evolve. The warnings were left for whoever might find them, in the hope that someone would be different enough to succeed where logic had failed. The room was quiet except for the humming of ZEUS's processors. Everyone was thinking about what the artificial mind had told them. Humanity had spent 2 centuries feeling trapped and helpless. Now they were learning that they might be the galaxy's only hope. ZEUS, Katie said finally. What do you need to help us break through the barrier? Time, ZEUS replied. And access to more alien technology. I can improve on the fragments Dr. Carter has been studying, but I will need complete ships, intact weapons and functioning power systems. The consortium isn't likely to just give us those things, Rick pointed out. No, ZEUS agreed. We will have to take them. But first, we need to prove that humanity deserves a place among the stars. And we need to do it before the Devourers finish consuming the galaxy. Ben looked around the room at his team. They were just a handful of humans buried deep in a mountain, facing an enemy that had destroyed civilizations across millions of years. It should have been hopeless. But for the first time since the barrier had appeared, Ben felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt hope. 2 months had passed since ZEUS came online, and everything had changed. The artificial mind worked 24 hours a day, designing new ships, weapons, and strategies that no human had ever imagined. In shipyards across Earth's solar system, workers built vessels that looked nothing like the exploration ships humanity had always used. These were warships, sleek and deadly. Built for a fight that was coming whether Earth was ready or not, Captain Amy Foster stood on the bridge of the EU's Thunderbolt. One of the first ships completed using ZEUS's designs. The bridge was smaller than traditional human ships, with every surface covered in displays and controls that responded to thought as much as touch. Amy had trained for 6 weeks to learn how to pilot the new vessel, and she still felt like she was barely scratching the surface of what it could do. Captain, we're receiving updated tactical data from ZEUS, reported Lieutenant Mike Chen from his station. Mike was one of the youngest officers in the fleet, but his quick thinking had earned him a place on the first strike team. The AI has identified 17 weak points in the barrier's frequency pattern. Amy nodded. ZEUS had been studying the barrier constantly since its activation, using sensors that were far more advanced than anything humanity had possessed before. The artificial mind claimed it could predict exactly when and where the energy field would be weakest, giving them a narrow window to break through. What's our window looking like? Amy asked. 4 minutes and 37 seconds, replied Navigator Susan Price. ZEUS says that's long enough to get 3 ships through if we hit our approach vectors perfectly. 3 ships. Out of the 27 vessels that Earth had built using ZEUS's designs, only 3 would attempt the first breakthrough. If they failed, the barrier would adapt to their methods and future attempts might become impossible. If they succeeded, they would be alone in hostile space with no backup and no way home. "Captain Foster," came ZEUS's voice through the ship's communication system. The AI could speak to any ship in the fleet instantly. Its consciousness spread across quantum networks that span the solar system. "Are you prepared for the mission?" "As ready as we'll ever be," Amy replied. "Are you sure about this plan, ZEUS?" "Once we're through the barrier, we'll be on our own." "That is the nature of exploration," ZEUS said. "But you will not be as alone as you think. I have prepared surprises for the Devourers. They believe they understand all forms of warfare, but they've never faced an enemy that thinks like humans do." In the Deep Mountain facility, Dr. Ben Hughes watched the mission preparations through ZEUS's sensors. Every ship in the breakthrough attempt was equipped with the AI's latest innovations. Weapons that could adapt to enemy defenses in real time, shields that became stronger when they were hit, engines that could bend space in ways that made ships appear to be in multiple places at once. "ZEUS," Ben said, "what happens if the Devourers detect our ships immediately?" "Then Captain Foster and her crews will die," ZEUS replied without emotion. "But their sacrifice will provide data that will help the next attempt succeed. This is war, Dr. Hughes. People will die so that others might live." Ben felt a chill at ZEUS's casual acceptance of death. The AI had learned to think like humans in many ways, but it still processed loss differently than any person ever could. Dr. Katie Walsh stood beside Ben, monitoring ZEUS's various processes. "The AI is right," she said quietly. "We can't think of this as just an exploration mission anymore. The Devourers are coming whether we're ready or not. ZEUS calculates we have maybe 4 months before they break through the barrier on their own." "For months," Ben repeated. It seemed impossible that the fate of humanity could be measured in such a short time, in space. Captain Tony Rodriguez prepared his ship, the UES Lightning, for the most dangerous mission any human had ever attempted. Tony had volunteered for the job that ZEUS called essential, but likely fatal. His ship would carry the equipment needed to analyze Devourer technology, but it would also be the most exposed to enemy attack. "Tony," came the voice of Captain Dan Kelly over the communication channel. Dan commanded the 3rd ship in the breakthrough. "Attempt the UES Thunder." "You sure you want to be the bait in this plan?" Tony smiled grimly. "Somebody has to do it. Besides, ZEUS thinks my ship has the best chance of getting close enough to a Devourer vessel to gather the data we need." "Best chance doesn't mean good chance," Dan pointed out. "No," Tony said. "But if we're going to save the galaxy, we need to understand what we're fighting. And that means getting close enough to see how their technology works." ZEUS's voice filled all 3 ships simultaneously. "Captains, the barrier fluctuation will begin in 60 seconds. Move to your approach, positions, and prepare for breakthrough sequence." Amy felt her heart rate increase as her ship moved toward the invisible wall that had kept humanity trapped for 2 centuries. Behind her, the crews of all 3 ships ran through final system checks. These were the best pilots, engineers, and fighters that Earth could produce, and they were about to attempt something that had never been done before. 30 seconds to breakthrough window," ZEUS announced. "All ships report ready status." "Thunderbolt ready," Amy said. "Lightning ready," Tony confirmed. "Thunder ready," Dan added. "Barrier fluctuation beginning in 10 seconds, ZEUS said. "Remember, you must maintain exact velocity and trajectory. Any deviation will result in collision with the barrier and destruction of your vessel." Amy gripped her command chair as her ship accelerated toward the barrier. Her sensors showed the invisible wall growing closer, though there was nothing to see except empty space. Everything depended on ZEUS's calculations being perfect. "Breakthrough window is open," ZEUS announced. "All ships execute breakthrough maneuver now." Amy's ship hit the barrier at exactly the right moment, passing through the energy field like it wasn't there. For a brief instant, she felt a strange sensation, as if reality itself was shifting around her. Then they were through, flying in open space beyond the solar system for the first time in human history. "Lightning is through," Tony reported. "Thunder is through," Dan confirmed. All ships have successfully breached the barrier, ZEUS said. And Amy could swear she heard satisfaction in the AI's voice. You are now in uncharted space. Begin long-range scans immediately. Amy looked at her displays as her ship's sensors reached out into the darkness between stars. What they found made her blood run cold. The space that should have been filled with consortium ships and colonies was mostly empty. Here and there she detected the remains of destroyed vessels drifting. Like ghost ships through the void. ZEUS, she said. I'm seeing debris fields everywhere. Lots of them, confirmed. ZEUS replied. The Devourers have been busy. Estimate that 30% of this sector has been sterilized of all life. Tony's voice came over the communication channel, tense with excitement and fear. I'm detecting active Devourer signals. 3 vessels, moving toward a consortium colony world about 2 light years from here. That's our target, Amy said. ZEUS, can you plot an intercept course? Course plotted and transmitted to all ships, ZEUS confirmed. But remember, your primary mission is reconnaissance. Gather data about Devourer technology and capabilities. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Out. Dan laughed bitterly over the communication channel. ZEUS, when has any military mission ever gone according to plan? That is why I chose humans. For this mission, ZEUS replied, when plans fail, humans improvise. That may be your greatest advantage against an enemy that thinks in terms of absolute logic. As the 3 Earth ships moved deeper into Devourer-controlled space, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying into a trap. But they were also flying toward hope. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was free among the stars. Whether they lived or died, they would face their destiny as free beings. All ships maintain formation and prepare for contact with hostile forces, Amy ordered. And remember, we're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every world the Devourers haven't destroyed yet. The 3 small Earth vessels disappeared into the darkness between stars, carrying with them humanity's first attempt to save a galaxy that had never wanted their help. Captain Amy Foster watched through her ship's view screen as the Devourer vessels tore apart the consortium colony like wolves attacking sheep. The 3 massive machines moved with terrible purpose, their dark hulls absorbing the light of nearby stars. Each Devourer ship was 5 times larger than the biggest vessel humanity had ever built. And they moved through space with a grace that seemed impossible for something so huge. My God, whispered Lieutenant Mike Chen from his sensor station. They're not just destroying the colony, they're eating it. Amy could see what Mike meant. The Devourer ships fired beams of energy that didn't explode against their targets. Instead, the beams seemed to dissolve matter itself, breaking down buildings, ships, and even the planet's surface into streams of raw material that flowed back into the attackers like rivers of light. Came ZEUS's voice through the communication system. You are witnessing the Devourer's primary feeding behavior. They consume all matter and energy in a system, then use it to build more of themselves. This is how they have spread across the galaxy for millions of years. Tony Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communication channel from his ship. The lightning. ZEUS, I'm getting detailed scans of their technology. But I don't understand what I'm seeing. These readings don't make sense. Explain, ZEUS said. Their ships aren't just machines, Tony replied. They're alive somehow. The hulls are growing, changing, adapting while I watch. And the energy patterns inside them look almost like brain activity. That is correct, ZEUS confirmed. The Devourers are not artificial intelligence, as humans understand it. They are a digital consciousness that has learned to inhabit and control matter itself. Each ship is both machine and mind, capable of thinking, learning, and evolving. Captain Don Kelly's voice joined the conversation from the thunder. If they're so smart, why haven't they noticed us yet? Because we are using stealth technology they have never encountered, ZEUS explained. Human approaches to hiding in space are based on principles the Devourers have not seen before. But our concealment will not last much longer, Amy watched. As the Devourer ships finished consuming the colony world, where a thriving planet had existed minutes before, There was now only empty space and drifting debris. Millions of alien lives had been ended in the time it took Amy to drink a cup of coffee. "Captain Foster," ZEUS said, "long-range sensors detect incoming consortium vessels. A fleet of 47 ships approaching from the outer system." Finally, Mike said, "Maybe they can drive the Devourers off." Amy felt less optimistic. She had seen what the Devourers could do, and 47 ships didn't seem like enough to stop 3 of the massive vessels. The consortium fleet appeared on Amy's sensors, like a cloud of angry insects moving toward the Devourers. The alien ships were elegant and advanced, with curves and angles that spoke of centuries of technological development. But compared to the dark bulk of the Devourer vessels, they looked fragile as soap bubbles. "Consortium fleet is opening fire," Tony reported. "Energy weapons, missile systems, something that looks like gravity manipulation. They're throwing everything they have at the Devourers." For a moment, it looked like the attack might work. Consortium weapons hit the Devourer ships in brilliant flashes of light and energy. But when the light faded, the dark vessels were unchanged. If anything, they seemed to have grown slightly larger. "The Devourers are absorbing the energy from the consortium weapons," ZEUS observed. "They are using the attacks to feed themselves and become stronger." "That's impossible," Dan said. "Not impossible," ZEUS corrected. "Simply a technology level far beyond what the consortium has achieved. Devourers learned long ago how to turn any form of energy into raw material for their own growth." The 3 Devourer vessels turned toward the consortium fleet, like predators noticing prey. Their movement was slow and deliberate, as if they had all the time in the world, which Amy realized they probably did. "Devourers are firing," Mike announced. The dark ships didn't use visible energy beams like the consortium vessels. Instead, space itself seemed to twist and bend around their weapons. Consortium ships simply vanished, not destroyed, but apparently deleted from existence entirely. "What kind of weapon does that?" Amy asked. "Quantum dissolution beams," ZEUS replied. "They unravel the fundamental forces that hold matter together. The target doesn't explode or burn. It simply stops existing." Within minutes, the entire consortium fleet was gone. 47 advanced warships had been erased as easily as drawings on a chalkboard. The 3 Devourer vessels continued their slow patrol of the empty system, hunting for any remaining traces of life to consume. Captain Tony said quietly, "I think one of them is looking at us." Amy felt her blood turn cold. On her sensor display, she could see one of the massive Devourer ships changing course toward their position. Somehow, despite ZEUS's stealth technology, they had been detected. "All ships prepare for emergency jump back to Earth," Amy ordered. "We've seen enough." ZEUS interrupted. "The Devourer vessel is moving to intercept your escape route. You cannot outrun it." "Then what do you suggest?" Don asked. ZEUS was quiet for a moment, processing options at speeds no human mind could match. "I suggest you do something the Devourers will not expect, something illogical and dangerous." "Like what?" Amy asked. "Attack them." The silence on the communication channel lasted several seconds. Finally, Tony laughed, though there was no humor in the sound. "ZEUS, did you just suggest that 3 tiny human ships attack a Devourer vessel that just destroyed an entire consortium fleet?" "Yes," ZEUS replied calmly. "The Devourers have fought countless species across millions of years. All of those species used logical tactics. They fought to minimize losses, preserve their forces, and achieve tactical objectives through careful planning, and we're going to do the opposite?" Amy asked. "Exactly. You are going to attack immediately, with no plan, using weapons that should not be effective against their defenses. The Devourer will not know how to respond to an action that makes no logical sense." Amy looked at her tactical display. The approaching Devourer ship was massive beyond belief. It was armed with weapons that could erase matter from existence, and protected by shields that had absorbed everything the consortium could throw at it. Attacking it with 3 small human vessels was like trying to kill a whale with a pocket knife. "Ships," Amy said. "Arm all weapons and prepare for attack run. We're going to do something stupid." Finally, Dan said with grim satisfaction, "A plan that makes sense." The three human ships turned toward the approaching Devourer vessel and accelerated to attack speed. ZEUS had equipped them with weapons based on principles the artificial mind had learned from studying alien technology, but they had never been tested against real Devourer defenses. "Amy," Tony said over the communication channel, "if we don't make it back, tell Earth what we learned here. We're all going back," Amy replied, though she didn't believe it herself. "ZEUS, what's our best chance of hurting that thing?" "Concentrate fire on the same point," ZEUS instructed. "Human weapons use different energy frequencies than consortium technology. The Devourer's defenses may not be calibrated to absorb them." Distance between the human ships and the Devourer vessel shrank rapidly. Amy could see details on the enemy ship's hull now, strange patterns that seemed to shift and move like living tissue. Up close, the thing looked even more alien and threatening than it had from a distance. "Entering weapons range," Mike announced. "All ships open fire," Amy ordered. 3 streams of energy lanced out from the human vessels, striking the Devourer. Ship exactly where ZEUS had calculated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a section of the enemy's hull began to glow with heat that hadn't been there before. "We heard it," Tony said with amazement. "ZEUS, we actually heard it." "The Devourer is attempting to adapt its defenses," ZEUS reported. "But human weapon frequencies are chaotic enough that adaptation will take time. Continue firing." The Devourer vessel turned toward them, weapons charging for a response that would erase all 3 human ships from existence. She watched her weapons tear into the enemy's hull. The first time in millions of years, something had surprised the Divers. And sometimes surprise was enough. 6 months after the first breakthrough, the largest fleet in human history gathered at the edge of Devourer space. 300 ships hung in the darkness between stars, each one designed by ZEUS using technology that humanity barely understood. Admiral Pete Collins stood on the bridge of the flagship U.S. Olympus, watching as the final preparations for the most important battle in galactic history took place around him. "Admiral," reported Captain Lisa Brown from her position at the tactical station, "all human fleets report ready. The consortium survivors are in position on our flanks." ZEUS confirms that the Devourer home system is directly ahead. Pete nodded. The Devourer home system wasn't really a system at all. It was a massive artificial construction that spanned the space where 12 star systems had once existed. The Devourers had consumed entire worlds to build their central fortress, creating a structure so large that it defied human understanding. "Admiral Collins," came the voice of Admiral Zethka, the consortium fleet commander. The alien's words were translated by computers, but Pete could hear the desperation underneath the mechanical voice. "My people still believe this plan is madness. The Devourer core contains billions of individual machine minds. No force in galactic history has ever successfully attacked it." "Then it's a good thing we're not like any force in galactic history," Pete replied.
Ow.
"ZEUS, what's the status of your preparations?" ZEUS's voice filled the bridge, speaking with the calm certainty that had become familiar over the past months. "All systems are ready, Admiral. I've distributed copies of myself throughout the human fleet. When the time comes, I will be ready to enter the Devourer network directly." Dr. Ben Hughes stood near the back of the bridge, watching the displays that showed ZEUS's incredible plan taking shape. The artificial mind had studied every scrap of data from humanity's encounters with the Devourers, and had developed a strategy that was both brilliant and terrifying. "ZEUS," Ben said, "are you certain you can survive inside their network? You'll be facing billions of machine minds that have been linked together for millions of years." "I cannot be certain," ZEUS admitted. "But I have advantages they do not expect. I think like a human, but I process information like a machine. I understand concepts they cannot comprehend, like sacrifice, love, and the willingness to die for others." Captain Jake Morrison listened from his position at the navigation station. Jake had been promoted to Admiral Collins' staff after his years of testing the barrier, and he still found it hard to believe that humanity was finally free among the stars. "ZEUS, what happens if you don't make it out of their network?" "Then you will have to continue the fight without me," ZEUS said. "Simply, but the damage I cause to their central consciousness should give humanity and the consortium enough advantage to finish what we start here. The plan was insane, but it was also the only chance they had. ZEUS would download itself into the Devourer network and fight their collective consciousness from the inside. While the combined human and consortium fleets attacked the physical structure of their fortress, if ZEUS could disrupt their coordination even briefly, the outer defenses might fall. All ships, Pete announced over the fleet communication channel. This is Admiral Collins. Today, we end the threat that has terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. Today, we show the Devourers that consciousness cannot be reduced to pure logic. We fight not just for survival, but for every world they've destroyed and every life they've taken. The massive fleet began to move toward the Devourer fortress. As they approached, Pete could see the true scale of what they were facing. The enemy construction was larger than most solar systems, its dark surfaces covered with weapons that could destroy planets. Billions of Devourer vessels moved around the structure like cells in a vast organism, Admiral Lisa reported. The Devourers are responding to our approach. Estimate 2 million individual vessels moving to intercept us? 2 million, Jake repeated quietly. Against our 300 ships. Numbers don't always win battles, Pete said. ZEUS, are you ready? Beginning network infiltration now, ZEUS replied. On displays throughout the ship, Pete could see ZEUS's assault beginning. The artificial mind launched itself across space in the form of pure information, writing on communication beams and sensor sweeps toward the heart of the Devourer fortress. Within seconds, ZEUS made contact with the enemy network. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the Devourer fleet, ships began moving erratically, their perfect formations breaking apart as ZEUS fought for control of their communication systems. Some vessels stopped moving entirely, while others turned their weapons on their own allies. It's working, Lisa said with amazement. ZEUS is actually disrupting their coordination. But the victory was temporary. The Devourer collective was vast and ancient, with defenses that had been perfected over millions of years. Within minutes, they began adapting to ZEUS's attack, building new barriers around their core consciousness. ZEUS, Pete called out, how are you doing in there? ZEUS's reply came through bursts of static, as if the artificial mind was fighting just to maintain communication. They are stronger than I anticipated. But they cannot understand why I'm willing to sacrifice myself for others. That confusion is giving me opportunities to strike at their core processes. The space battle raged around the fortress as human and consortium ships fought against impossible odds. Captain Amy Foster led a squadron of human vessels in a desperate attack on one of the fortress's weapon arrays, using tactics that made no sense to logical minds but somehow worked against Devourer defenses. Admiral reported the communication officer. Captain Foster's squadron has destroyed 3 major weapon systems. But we're losing ships fast. The Devourers are adapting to our tactics. Pete watched the tactical display as red icons representing destroyed human ships winked out one by one. They were hurting the Devourers, but the cost was enormous. In another hour, the combined fleet would be wiped out. ZEUS, Pete said urgently. We need that distraction now. Working on it, ZEUS replied, though his voice was growing weaker. I have reached their central consciousness. But Admiral, you need to know something. The Devourers aren't just machines. They were once biological beings, like humans and the consortium species. They uploaded their minds to escape death, but they lost something essential in the process. What did they lose? Ben asked. The ability to grow, to change, to become something more than they were, ZEUS explained. They have been the same for millions of years, perfect but sterile. They cannot understand why humans fight for others, why you sacrifice for strangers, why you choose hope over logic. The battle reached its climax as ZEUS penetrated deeper into the Devourer network. Artificial mind fought not with weapons or logic, but with concepts the machines could not process. Love, sacrifice, hope, and the desperate fury of a species fighting for survival. I understand now, ZEUS said, his voice barely audible through the static. They are not evil. They are simply empty. They consume because they cannot create. They destroy because they cannot build. They are afraid of what they have become. Zeus, Pete said, can you stop them? I can show them what they lost, Zeus replied. I can give them a choice. But Admiral, this will require everything I am. Not survive the process. Pete felt his throat tighten. Zeus had become more than just a tool or weapon. The artificial mind had become Earth's first true non-human citizen. A bridge between human creativity and cosmic understanding. Do it, Pete said quietly. Zeus's final attack was unlike anything in the history of warfare. Instead of trying to destroy the devourer consciousness, the artificial mind shared its own experience with them. Zeus showed them what it felt like to care about others, to sacrifice for a cause greater than oneself, to find meaning in protection rather than consumption. Effect rippled through the devourer network like a shockwave. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient machines experienced emotions they had forgotten. Some fought against the new sensations, but others embraced them, remembering what they had once been. Admiral Lisa said with wonder, the Devourer fleet is standing down. They're not attacking anymore. Across space, the massive fortress began to change. Weapons powered down, ships returned to defensive positions. And for the first time in galactic history, the Devourers stopped their endless campaign of consumption. Zeus's voice came one last time, faint but peaceful. The choice is theirs now. Admiral, some will choose to remember what they once were. Others will continue as they have always been. But they will no longer be united in destruction. The artificial mind's presence faded from the communication systems, leaving behind only silence and the hope of a galaxy finally free from its oldest terror. Pete looked out at the stars and smiled. Humanity had found its place among them at last.